Okay, I'd like to call to order the Public Works Committee meeting for Wednesday, January 10th. And I'd like to first open up to the public an open forum. If there's anything that anyone wants to bring up that's not on the agenda here, this is the time to do that. And seeing that there's no one out there, I'm going to close open forum. And then the second item here is to recommend reappointment of Cam Dorian to a new 4-year term on the Public Works Committee from February 1st, 2023 to January 31st, 2027. So we should have done this before and we hadn't done that. So I'd like to button that up. So is there anybody who would like to make a motion for that or?
So moved.
Okay, second, any? I'm sorry?
Yeah, I'll
Yeah. Okay, so, then, we'll have a vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That's carried. Then the third item is to recommend reappointment of Tom McCullough and Galen Strovers to the Public Works Committee for a 4-year term beginning February 1st, 2024 until January 31st, 2028. Do I have any motion for that?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Okay. And so all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Okay, that's carried. So we have our board members and our committee members. And for the record, also, just to say that, not Galen. Cam, sorry, Cam, he's on the, he's on the computer.
Isn't he on planning and
internet.
zoning as well?
What's that?
Planning and zoning?
I haven't heard about that one, the planning zoning or anything like that. Okay, yeah. Okay, so number 4 then here is to approve the minutes from the 2023 meetings. Is there anybody that has anything that they want to mention about that or else just to have a motion to approve that?
Is that why all these are in here?
Yes. Mhm. That was, yep, just to make sure that everything is correct that we've talked about. If there's any objections to what's in there, or anything that needs to be changed for the record.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I read through them and I didn't see anything, so I'll move approving the minutes of the meetings as distributed.
I'll second.
You'll second? Okay, then for all those who approve, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, carried. Now we'll get into the real meat of tonight, and that is the 2025 road bond preliminary cost estimate review. So, Tom, maybe you can bring us up to speed on this?
I will do what I can. I was hoping Joe would be here because this is an estimate
Yeah.
that was prepared by WSM. So, but so basically what we were looking to do with this estimate is it just gave us an idea of what to expect the road bond to be for 2025, give us a ballpark figure. And the reason we needed that is we wanted to see, are we going to move forward with this as a potential assessment project? Or if we were just going to do it like we did the previous bond where it was just funded by the general fund. And so that's the question you guys will need to answer tonight is, do you feel we should make a recommendation to the council one way or the other?
Mhm.
And so the thing that was laying on your desk tonight, I kind of prepared that today. And all it is just copies of the preparation information we had for the previous road bond, trying to give you an idea of what that looked like a little bit. That was our first attempt to trying to make a cycle out of road bonds and try to get our, have our roads on a cycle as far as when they were repaired. And so we set the cycle of 40 years and we did an approximate $1.7 million road bond at the time that I believe fix 5.5 miles of road. Right now, what we're proposing for 2025, we're hoping to fix as many as 9 miles of road. And the estimate is coming in at 6.1 million so far. Now, it's a very broad estimate. There's a lot of details we haven't figured out yet. It's just to give you an idea where that could land. It's possible we could take some of those roads out of this bond and move them to the next one. Or make some changes to what we're doing to each individual road. If we needed to lower it, it's possible we could increase the bond too if we wanted to do more. This is one of the questions I would have had for Joe is, did he have things like, say, the roundabout for City Hall Street included in his estimate here? I'm not sure. He probably did, but I don't know that for sure. So little things like that they may not be so little, could impact it significantly up or down.
Okay, so what we have here is, you have a 1981 road overlay list, and that was done back then, I take it. And that's for a 5-year road bond. At that time, it was 1.7 some million.
Yeah, so really what has been happening is our bonds have been about 7 years apart. And so I started working on a new cycle. Look, we're trying to shorten up the cycle to closer to 30 years.
Yeah,
Because 40 was our first attempt. We didn't have any standard at all at that time, and so we needed to get started on it somehow. So we set it at 40. We knew that we'd probably come back and shorten that. So suggesting that moved to 30, we wouldn't have to do 9 miles per year to keep that cycle going. We need to do about 7 3/4 of a mile every bond to make that work. So we're a little over on that.
What do you mean by cycle?
So what I'm saying is that every 30 years, every road in the city would be resurfaced. Some needed a little sooner, some needed a little slower. You know, your higher mileage roads may not get the same cycle time as, say, a dead end road would.
Yeah.
But on average, we're saying that each road would be resurfaced about every 30 years.
This is a pretty good sized chunk of money. And I guess my first question is, what does that do to property taxes, if anything?
I can't answer that question yet.
It's pretty hard to make a recommendation on something like this when we don't have any idea what it's gonna do to taxes.
Well, let me give you a broad idea of what it might mean. So, let me find my. So if you look at this packet that I had on your desk. There was a 5-year road plan in that, for that time. And it kind of outlays what, on the last page, it outlines what that last bond did. So the payments at that time were 265,000 per year on 1.7 million. And that's on a 10-year bond. So if you extrapolate that out to 6.1, what I came up with is it'd be about 966,000 if you do a 10-year bond.
so, you have the 5-year bond here as well as a 10-year road bond. So what's the difference there? Well, why are both of these here with the 1981 road overlay list?
So what that was is I was trying to predict what the next bond would, what roads would be in it. So that's the ones that are in the 10-year. So if you look at the list of those roads, a lot of them are the ones that we're considering today.
Oh, so this would be for the next bond that we're looking at 2025?
Yeah, so this is what I was predicting would be the roads we would be looking at when we did this bond. So this is done back in 2018.
This was done in 2018, so we currently have this bond in place?
No, this is what we're considering. So this never
Okay.
happened
I
in
see,
2018. We were trying to predict what would be coming up
okay.
by the time we did this next bond.
So we have a current road bond right now, don't we?
We have one in repayment, yeah.
Yeah, how much was that bond?
I believe that was 1.7.
Well, that's this 5-year road bond plan here? That's this one here?
Yeah, the first one above, yeah.
So the 1981 was just a road overlay list, just you wanted to get going.
Yeah, so what I was trying to do is predict how often were we having to replace roads? And
Mhm.
so the roads we did on the last road bond, from what I could tell, the last time they were resurfaced was 1981.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so currently we have this on the second page here, the 5-year bond is what we currently have right now.
Say that
That-
again, I'm sorry. I didn't-
This 5-year road bond plan, road list that you have here, this is what we currently have as a bond right now.
No, not there. So yeah, these, on this 5-year road bond, we've done those already. So that's what we're paying for right now.
Right now,
Correct.
and that was set up in 2000,
We started planning that in 2017. And
Okay.
so it was, the road bond was, started in 2018. Some of these roads were done in 2018 and some were finished in 2020.
so the bond itself was established in 2018. Okay, so we're just running out of that this year or last year.
Oh, actually, so there are 3 road, we would have a cycle of, I believe it's 3 road bonds. There's 2 in payback at any given time. So right now, we either are about to pay off or have paid off the road bond that the city used to build Pocket Park. The County 18 improvements, I can't remember what else there is, but there was a bunch of roads that were done then,
Uh-huh.
part of the 371 project. We had some expenses with that. So that was one road bond. So we knew that one was gonna be coming off about this time. So that's why we picked 2025
Okay.
as a point for this
And
bond.
how much is that bond?
I would have to find out.
Yeah, I think, for me personally, I sort of like what Dill was saying that I'd like to know more what we're gonna be dropping, because that does impact the,
Mhm,
what we're paying in taxes.
it does.
So, and then to compare it with what we're looking at right now, and from what I saw here, we're looking at like, this is sort of a wish list, I assume.
It
Right
is,
now.
yes.
And, right now, we're looking at like 6.1 million or something,
Yes.
which is a lot. And, the idea of, going to assessments, whether we do that or stay with bonding, really depends on, how much it is, and
Mr. Chair,
Mhm.
Tom, I don't know, in my mind, in my experience, this is almost like putting the cart before the horse, because you're asking the committee to review these estimates and with really no idea of how they're going to be paid for. It seems to me anyway, that we need to get more of a roadmap on what the city council's policies are going to be going forward as to how to pay for their road improvements over the period of time listed. If you're going to start assessments, then you got to start, the wheels in motion to establish the policies and implementing that. And then a better idea of what the city council wants to spend on an annual basis to achieve what the goals are.
Yep.
To give, we're just an oversight committee making a recommendation to the city council. We can see what roads need to be repaired or overlaid or new construction. But really, what's the priority of the roads, and how much money are we talking about to have available to do that? So I'm looking at this, and it looks good, but I have no clue as to how I would start going about making a recommendation.
Sure.
Do you have any idea what this did to the city's finances, these other bond, that went through? Do you have any idea in the past, what that did to
percentage
taxes?
of the levy?
Yeah.
I'll
That would give a start
have to
anyway.
find out.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, but I thought I've, heard somewhere that the current road bond and I didn't know what the number was, but if we have a levy of 10, 10%, that it was somewhere like about 1.6 or 1.7. That it affects it like, it adds 1.6 or 1.7 that,
So,
yeah, but I have to verify
well,
that.
you know,
I don't
the road
but
bond
I'd
is
like to
one
get
thing.
that number.
Mr. Chair, the road bond, would be one thing, but what would be the annual debt service that the city is willing
Well,
to, or is willing to budget?
Yeah, and that's why I was asking about what's coming off the books, because it sounds like 1.7 million is coming off. We're paying that off this year.
I think that bond continues. It's one previous, and I don't remember what the total of that was. That was
Okay.
for the county heating stuff, the pocket park, the roundabout.
Yeah, and if we would need to know that, to really make any type of decisions,
Mhm.
because if it is, say example, it is 1.7 million, and this is 6.1,
Mhm.
that's like 3 times
Right.
more.
Yeah.
Want to give you a little bit of just an idea of what inflation is doing
Uh-huh.
with this. So I sat just before the meeting trying to figure out per mile roughly what we were paying. So on a 1.7, we did 5.5 miles, so it was about 309,000 per mile. So with this new estimate, it's 9 miles at 6.2 million, so that's about 688,000 per mile.
Mm.
So you can see that that's more than doubled in that amount of time. So if we were doing, just gonna try to figure out quick what that would be, 5.5. Yeah, so in today's dollars, if we redid the previous bond, instead of 1.7, it would be 3.784. And so we're almost doubling the mileage on that,
Okay.
at 9. So,
Maybe what,
I mean, we
what
can't-
I'd like to probably see is to have something more of a schedule, to get to the 2025 bond, what type of scheduling do we have to do to get to that point? That's just one issue. But before that, might be good to have out, what our current bonds are right now. Have it listed out, what they are, when they're supposed to end. How much, are we paying off of all that? How does that affect the levy, in those types of terms?
Mhm.
And then as a bond, then we can look at this estimate here, which is nice to have, this estimate for a wish list. But then maybe on the wish list to put down what are the priorities on this wish list. If we have to start cutting, because I know that's going to happen at the city council level, which ones are the most important? And then, which ones are not as important?
So it gets a little muddier too. Some of these roads may have cost participation, even though if we don't have a general assessment policy.
Uh-huh.
For instance, the roads on Grandview really aren't at their cycle time. They wouldn't be in this bond except for they've kind of fallen apart. Their cycle is much shorter. Part of that is because there's no drainage. Those roads suffer terribly from drainage. And
Yeah,
there would have to probably be some cost participation there. So I can't answer that question, what we should be looking for, cost sharing with them through there. That probably a separate meeting. So
I think Grandview is a really
that's one example of.
a unique example too, because it's such a large
Mhm.
entity. But for like standard streets, like I noticed that like Etna and Lane.
So what we've been using as a priority is really just pavement age. I mean, that has been it. And then what is the condition of it today? How many complaints are we getting
Mhm.
on that segment of mile? Obviously, the more heavily traveled streets like City Hall Street are gonna generate, Street will generate more complaints than say Edna, because there's
Mhm.
just not as many people on that one. So I would say that would be probably one way we would prioritize what roads get done is amount of traffic.
Right. And that's what I was thinking too, looking through this map and the list that you had on here with the pricing. I sort of was looking at which ones are the most expensive, and that's, the most expensive ones are probably the more traveled ones, like.
Right, well, you're talking about things like bike paths and other things too that are being considered with this,
Uh-huh.
so.
Has there been any discussion with Grandview as far as them partaking of part of this?
Not yet.
Has there been any thought about it by the
I've
council?
thought about it, but with the staff, but we haven't talked about it in the council yet, no. When they built the roundabout, there was an opportunity to have a discussion at that time, but there was a change in leadership in Grandview, so it wasn't a conversation that was had.
I believe I'm correct that if this was assessed, you would need a feasibility study.
Right.
Seems to me that we need something like that to come to a decision here.
I think what we were looking to do is because it affects the timing of how this bond is, approached, is because the 429 process has more steps
Hmm.
to it. So I think that's kind of what Joe was looking for, is direction of, are we gonna be looking at this as an assessment project or not? It's a simpler process if we don't look at it that way.
But that would tell us or give us an idea of where the money's coming from.
right,
If we were to do an assessment, what percentage of that overall cost would be the burden of the assessments?
so right now, the city does not have an assessment policy. The previous council did not want to have an assessment policy, and most of the councils the city of Nisswa has have not pursued an assessment policy. So the current policy really is nothing is assessed except for new construction. So if say a development comes in, it's 100%. Property owner requested that's not at standard, say for instance, like Centennial Lane, those folks have asked a few times to have their road improved. If they were to get it improved, that would be a 100% assessment. Anything that would be over and above bringing the road, keeping the road in standard, for instance, if they wanted special lighting, we were talking about this in terms of Main Street, special lighting, bump outs, flower planters, those kind of things would be extra, those would be assessed under the current policy. So as far as repairing the surface of the road or the subgrade,
Mhm.
we haven't been assessing that.
Can we do a cost sharing without doing an assessment? I mean, essentially, they're the same thing.
Yes. If you had a voluntary cooperation, like I was trying to suggest with Grandview, that wouldn't necessarily have to be a forced assessment. It would be a,
Yeah, I can't really speak for previous previous councils, but my understanding is that if we start to get into assessments, which we don't have a policy for currently, it could get really gummed up by anybody who gets a lawyer and decides that they're gonna fight this. And Tom, you've had experience on this,
I
right?
think, yeah, I've never heard of assessments that are not, or cost sharing that are not assessments. Yeah, you're dealing with bonds and you're dealing with, debt of the city. So you have to have something that you can enforce legally, right? That's a question for your city attorney.
Mhm.
And I'm not sure percentage, percentage wise, Galen, you were asking, what could that cost sharing be? I think some of that's in statute. I don't know. But Mr. Chairman, I just ask a general question. This is a huge leap, I think, from what the city's done in the past, right? I mean, what would help me, and I think what would help the committee would be to see kind of a historical picture of where the town has been in the past. Bond, you know, the bonding amounts, and then a history of what the debt service has been, which has been, you know, at large tax, right? In Nisswa up to this point in time. And then maybe a better idea for this committee as well as the city council as to what difference would that make if the city did implement an assessment policy? And then how could that be worked in with what the city council is willing to pay on an annual basis as far as debt service? Because otherwise I wouldn't know how to, like I said, I wouldn't know how to react to this because there's really nothing, you know, there's the engineering part, which we have, but the financial part, you know, it's not really there.
Sure.
We have a history of what we've done up to this point in time, but I think we need some more financial analysis, which would typically be done by you know, some kind of consultant. I don't know if the city council uses a financial
We
consultant.
do, at least for the sewer systems.
Okay,
PFM.
like that, and maybe through whoever the city bonds through. You have a bond council or something that would help kind of put this into a more of a framework, making it easier to react to now and going forward.
Right.
I agree with Tom. I think we need to know what the city council can stomach as far as an annual, or monthly, or however you want to fix it, budget. And then we work backwards from that to prioritize what needs to be done. Because if we go ahead and approve this whole thing, we might blow the city's budget completely out of the water.
Well, the city council wouldn't accept it for one thing, but you know, it's going to be a case where this is how much we're willing to spend on an annual basis for this road project. And then it's kind of like working backwards. Well, with this amount of money, we can do this amount of work. And then you prioritize what your projects are for that upcoming construction season, and off you go.
Right.
So what I'm thinking is, why don't we, for the next meeting, if you could get together the history that we've done, what ponds currently are there, when do they end? And then we can, and then what Tom mentioned about the, you know, the assessments issue, what that would mean, how that would be done. And from my perspective, it's just from what I've been hearing is that up till now, we have never done assessments, and the bond is the way that that past councils have wanted to go. They wanted to avoid a lot of the issues with that you can get with assessments. And the main argument I've heard is that basically with an assessment, you're taxing the users twice for the road. And I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what I've been hearing. That in addition to the levy, they also have to pay an assessment. So the levy will cover some of the, you know, the costs of roads or whatever, if there's a combination, and then there's the assessment as well on top of that.
Which I think is based on benefit to the individual property owners.
Correct, right. For the assessment side, right?
They do that.
Mhm.
So what it is the assessment can't be more than the increase of the value of the property after the improvements are
Mhm.
complete.
I see.
So I think most cities have an assessment policy of no more than 50%,
And the rest they would bond, so
but
that,
most cities also do have an assessment policy. in the
Uh-huh.
town.
right.
Quick question, sorry if you already covered this and I missed it, but in this though, I see the storm sewer and the curbing is part of this, right? And, I will say most of the city doesn't have that, correct? And so really this plan is also to, I'll say, spring the city ahead into the 21st century on getting curb and gutter. in a lot of these areas, and that's what the initial cost and expense is. And no matter if we look backwards, knowing the history backwards, which is create information, we have to know, based upon, like, for instance, the downtown study and the, at the planning and zoning, what we're working towards, from that into the city, what the curb and gutter will allow us to do with, let's say, pervious coverage on lots, on properties, different things like that, and helping propel the town forward in the future. And so I think no matter what we do or what we look at, I think that is probably the key piece that needs to be brought up and addressed, that we are presenting so much more for going forward in the future rather than looking backwards on, I'll say, getting the city, more compliant maybe with our lakes and our runoff and, protecting, the water and stuff like that with having curb and gutter. So is that a fair thing to say?
Very
that
fair.
this has that maybe is being overlooked a little bit?
Well, for instance, I'll give you one example. On Upper Roy Lake Road, we have added asphalt gutters in a lot of places where we had stream washouts. So what you're seeing in here is curb and gutter, actual curb and gutter to replace that. It'll last longer and
Right.
work better.
I-
So,
Yeah, I guess I tried to put curb and gutter when we did it, we drove through all the roads. Is where we had the problems that he's talking about. And what you have now is you have just the trough,
Right.
with the bitumen. And it doesn't really hold up. You can tell the way that is. You can direct water better, flatter. We have a lot of issues around here that are less than 0.5% grade. And bituminous doesn't move that. You need concrete to move it, and curbs. So if we're gonna have to do storm sewer, the best way to direct storm sewer is with curbing. I didn't put it everywhere, but was pretty heavy on it. Church Street up here, there's an issue, gonna be an issue out here. Like you set up on, Roy and, where's the-
Edna Lane as
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
those
So-
areas.
That's a little sporadic out there to
Right.
fix the problems, and it's more of a permanent fix with some of that. The stuff around here is exactly what you're talking about. Some of that should be done.
Right. And so I guess, bringing that up, comparing, it's almost apples to oranges. This isn't what we've done in the past. This is a step up from what we've done in the past, and therefore to evaluate, cost and stuff looking backwards, it's more in my mind, an education piece moving forward to everybody on it's not what you're used to. We're kind of, taking a step up on all of this, if that makes sense. But I think that's probably, just roughly looking at the numbers, that's a pretty big number and a key piece in this, pretty substantial. And so it's not replacing the road as is, it's replacing it to the upgrade. And so I think it's, as much as figuring out the numbers, which I agree with that whole side, I think there's an element of education that's going to need to take place, with the council, with the city, with the citizens, to understand what we're up against and why we need the curb and gutter, because we want to protect the lakes, the rivers, the streams. We're trying to be compliant with, the watershed, all that stuff. So.
And in addition, you have the video of, for the sewer lines. Take it, the video as well. There's like 8 different items, and basically it's where we were having the drainage issues as well, it looks like, and erosion issues. So that's all in here too, which is important. So that we don't cause trouble with our
one
sewage
more thing
plant.
I would point out too, a lot of the roads tonnage wise are being improved by the base corrections that we're doing. Most of our roads are going to at least 7 tons and they've been 5. So that is a benefit if you're anybody who's tried to build a house or anything
Mhm.
in springtime. You basically can't bring anything down the road
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, can I make a recommendation?
Mhm.
Number one, that we ask the city administrator to do some research and with whoever you're using as a financial consultant to bring a history of these road bonds and the debt service that's been paid over the years for those back to, this committee. And then, I guess at some point for the city council to review. And number two, to however you do it, to put an item on a future agenda, hope, sooner than later, about a discussion about the feasibility of assessments being even a possibility in the village. And because I think if it's not going to be assessed, that's going to be a large chunk of revenue that's not going to be a part of what we're talking about doing here. And then it'll just be a matter of how much does the city council want to bring forward and present to the public as, an increase in tax
Mhm.
for, all your different funds, including your debt service funds.
Right.
So I think it's about time probably to put that on an agenda, get it out there and have it discussed and see, where it's at. Because on something like that, it's count the votes. It is or it isn't, a feasibility.
Yeah, I think it is difficult to come up with whether we should assess or bond without that information, first of all. And then I think I can take that, Joe and I could take that to the city council too, to talk about that. Maybe even, just as a discussion for now, what we're willing to, what the council might be willing to buy, how much they would want to pay for this.
The engineering's here,
Mhm.
it is what it is.
And I like what
now-
I see here too. It's really well done, I think.
Yeah.
For a good estimate anyway.
I did talk to Anderson Brothers and tried to get a hook on what the tonnage prices will be, because obviously that's one of the bigger items out there. Right. So I used their number and bumped it up about 10%. These numbers are high a little bit,
Mhm.
because we're looking at 2025, we're not looking at next year or bidding it down. So I don't know, you gotta kind of go with that. But sometimes people, what they'll do is, I didn't hear the earlier conversation, is when you're waiting out a bond or doing a feasibility study, and you get 427, you got to that whole process if you're going to assess. But I guess what I'm getting at is sometimes they'll take and leave the project large, bid it, and then chop it down and meet any kind of budget. Just because if the prices came in really good and we took off roads ahead of time that we were gonna do, thinking that we wanted to bring it down a budget size, and then all of a sudden we get a really good bid, we're foolish not to use a really good bid and get them other ones back on there. It's easier to take something off than it is to put something on later, just like doing the budget for the city,
Mhm.
Any questions? I'm sorry I was late. I thought it was 5:30.
Mm.
You guys have any questions for me about this that I maybe have missed?
Yeah, I had a couple questions. There's, I think, 4 or 5 roads that were still gravel, right? They're gravel roads. And so we're showing,
5, 6 of them. The
5 of
green
them?
one, yeah.
yeah, so we're gonna be, the proposal is to put asphalt on them.
Yeah.
Right. Plus, I guess, we're also looking at widening the roads, certain roads which need to meet the city standards.
Yes.
And most of those were the gravel roads in the first place. They would make them wider. And then there's a couple of more, it seemed like.
Yeah, one is the alleyway.
Ah.
The east alleyway is.
Where we put curb and gutter too, will just naturally have to go on the banks and do some work
Mhm.
on it. So,
Okay. And with that curb and gutter on the upper Roy Lake Road, that would help a lot with some of those issues that we're having with the trail as well then? Or the erosion, the issues that we're having?
That's Lower Roy Lake Road.
I'm sorry. That's Lower Roy. Okay. So this is for Upper Roy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
up
Lower
on-
Roy is
yeah.
not.
Okay,
And like that, you know, it's not to do the whole road. To do the areas where we have real bad issues, we can direct it and put storm sewer going across, put catch basins in so it properly drains.
okay, and then the other question I had was on this map was the trails. And I was trying to figure out, it seems like there's a lot of trail improvements in here. But the amount for that is not that much, I was thinking.
No, they only put two of them in the back in the actual project.
But when you look at the map, it looks like it's a fair amount.
That's for, Amber has got, we've been kind of working on putting in the proposed, future trails that may come up. The
Oh,
dotted
okay, so
one-
that's not part of this study
Yeah,
whatsoever.
that's just,
Mhm.
it kind of gives a picture of the overall roads, the idea that we might have trails going in there, where the trails work. And which one she wants to think to do on, I think the biggest one is Church Street.
So those are just proposed, it's not part of this engineering.
I have the one for, I have numbers in there for, Church Street. I don't think there was another one, was there?
And Upper
Trail.
Roy. Is Upper Roy Road?
Yeah, she has. I thought we were painted trail, if I'm not mistaken. Possibly.
My memory is getting me here right off the bat.
Yeah, Upper Roy Lake Road. We were talking about a painted trail possibly on Upper Roy Lake Road. So the road would have to be a little bit wider to allow that to happen.
Tom, I think, Tom expressed things pretty well as
Yeah.
to what needs to be done. I think basically all we're doing now is spinning our wheels until we get that information.
Mhm.
I think it's going to take, quite a bit of discussion on various people's parts to decide what's going to be done. This is an all-inclusive project, the way it looks.
It is. Right now, it's
Yeah.
anything that should or could be done. So
Okay.
we expected to pare this list down or change it.
My first
Um,
question would be, who decided to do this, for instance, or
Oh,
that?
so all this is based on so far is pavement condition.
Mhm.
So we've looked at roads that are worn out. It's their turn. And so they're on this list.
Well, I think once we have some idea how the thing would be financed, then you can start paring this thing down to what is actually practical. You know, I think you'll find right away that some of this stuff obviously can't be done right now.
Yeah,
Mhm.
fully
Yeah.
expect that to happen.
But really, I don't know how we can make any decision on this without knowing more about the costs.
Yeah, it's complex. And
is.
I would say another thing too, and it's good to probably say this up front. We've been calling this a 2025 road bond. If we needed to add 1 or 2 years to get the planning right, I don't think anybody, at least in the staff, would object to that. The only thing we would have to be aware of is there's a few roads where the pavement is getting very
Falling
rough.
apart.
And we're gonna have to, maybe we have to bust this up into 2 smaller bonds. In that case.
Yeah, and I guess I'd like to know which ones are ready to fall apart in 1 or 2 years, which one in this list?
Well, Church Street would be one.
Yeah, so
City Hall
that would
Street's-
be a priority, in other words. So those are the ones that we would want to pick up. And that's I was getting back to that question about
Yeah,
what's the
that's what those
priority?
are.
What's breaking down?
Upper Roy Lake Road.
Yeah. Yeah,
The
so
list is like this.
in addition to
actually-
what Tom mentioned, I would like to see more about the priorities that would be in here that absolutely needs to be done versus that should be done. And then that could be put off for a little longer. And then that will help us a little bit more too, I think. Once we can figure out which way we want to go.
Yeah.
I always like to bring up the point that what I was telling him is that the list is this big for these
Yeah.
roads. We're probably, what you're seeing compared to that list is only about that much of the list. And when you push them back, that list, the list that need to get done gets bigger every year you push them back.
Right.
Can I just ask a general question? So is the feedback from this committee, are you looking, is the goal of it the financial feedback? Because that's what a lot of the questions is. What do we think the city can stomach and give the financial answers on? Or is the feedback on what the process and how the determination of what gets fixed first, second, and third can happen? I guess I'm just a little bit unclear on what the feedback, the role of the feedback on here is. Is it financial feedback? Or is it feedback on the process on how to make these decisions on what is happening?
Both.
Okay,
I think Joe, what I understand and what my, would be to give more tools to the city council to make these decisions, because the city council makes the final decisions,
Right,
right? And I think this financial history and, getting started on a program, going forward and sticking to a program to get this list, pared down and get it into a rotation like Tom's talking about doing, like a 30-year rotation. You got to start somewhere.
sure.
And you made the point, it's a huge leap from
Right.
where we're at right now. So if you have more information to start with, you get out on a better foot, financial information, the engineering information, and then ultimately the city council interacting with the general public and also determining what you want to spend from year to year on debt service in order to do these jobs. But you got to start somewhere.
Sure. And so then with that, my question is, do you start from looking through it through the financial lens? Or do you start looking through it from the priority lens on what needs to be done? Just because I view that we should pick a lens and focus on starting in one place or the other to help dictate the other decision, because it seems like almost if you do it parallel, the end's not going to end up. What dollars are decided with what the criteria is put together isn't going to match in a line. And so I'm just wondering, even as we go through the process, is there a starting point on which one we want to look at? Is it the financial aspect, the history, the inflation, where we are with the bonds, the years over time, and kind of put that together? Or
I think we need to look at the financial side of it. I mean, we've got to know how much money we got to work with, I think,
That's, yeah.
and then we can prioritize the roads that are the worst. If we have $1 million, we'll do $1 million worth of the worst roads kind of thing.
And then I think Mr. Chair, the financial road and then the road priority, well, that can change. That's flexible. But at least you have, on something like this, on your work that Mr. Bloomer and the city engineer have done, you have a good idea of what the priorities are. But that's, from year to year, you decide, I have this much money, we can do this much work.
Sure. And so those were my questions, just, as this process goes forward, kind of what steps are we taking in what order to figure this out? To make it clear, I guess.
I think we've sort of taken a very good first step in getting the engineering side. You get the wish list. How much does it cost? Then I think we need to have the history too, because we need to know what bonds are coming off so that we don't compound the levy or the assessments. And so once we know, for example, if it was 1.7 million that comes off the books, well, I would see no problem whatsoever if we could do all of this for 1.7 million.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen.
Mhm.
And now we've seen, at least with the engineering side, we've seen now it's at 6.1 million as the wish list.
Mhm.
Well, now we start to need, at that point, I think now we need to look more at the financial side. And then to come up with ideas of how well can we handle it through a process of either assessments or bonding.
I would have to find out what the amount was, but originally when we kicked in this 40-year cycle, we were putting in an escalator into the levy. I think that's probably been chopped at times. And so we haven't kept up, you know, because like I said, if we did just the exact same amount of roads that we did in 2018 today, what was 1.7 would be 3.8 today.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just the reality of it. So
And also the other issue too, from a financial standpoint is that the 1.7, what interest rate was that?
And lay it out.
I have a feeling it's a lot higher today.
might be, I don't know.
Yeah.
Getting kind of back at the chicken and the egg thing. You know, other cities I've worked for, sometimes this is more of a evolving deal. I by no means have got these perfect. And I'll find out things when we go into design, whether or not, oh, we don't need that, or, oh, we need more, you know, those kind of things will perk your head. So if you, all of a sudden we wait until you, okay, this is what we're gonna do now. And if you base it off of this, then we'll probably be in trouble when we get towards the end of that job as designer. But on the other side of that coin, you need to have some information to make a decision. So,
Yeah.
And my first thing was, and we've talked about this before, was that the biggest thing was you guys were discussing whether or not to assess or bond. This was, I would have not done this if you would have said, we're gonna bond. I wouldn't have done it this way. Or if you would have said, we're gonna assess. There's two different ways I have to do it. We have 427 process and all that. So the idea here was to get a good ballpark figure and a feeling for what the roads are so that you could maybe make that decision. Because remember, the decision you make is the engineering goes up when it goes to
427.
yeah, 427. Not just because of that, it's just we have to survey everything. We have to also get in and get all the lengths for if we're gonna do by front footage, you know, for assessments. Those kind of things have to be worked out. So you wouldn't want to go through all that process and find out, oh, no, we don't want to do this, you know, that way now, because you spend a lot of money trying to do it that way.
Yeah.
And I realize it's a chicken and the egg, and decisions will probably have to be made initially, but then I'll probably come back with information when we get to design one way or another that's going to say, well, we got a problem here, or this is working out better or worse. And then, like I said earlier, sometimes it's bringing it down to the bid so you can find out which ones you actually want, you're gonna chop, and if you have to. If you have a price in your mind and you're doing it the bond way.
So Joe, just a question for you. If we were to go with the assessment route, what type of extra cost would the city incur to have you do all the extra things for the 429 that you would need to do?
If we did all nine miles of roads.
Yeah.
I've been trying to get, Chad to give me a number on that. The surveying is gonna be a lot.
Okay.
And it'll be in the neighborhood of probably 60,000-70,000 at least.
Okay.
For the survey.
Because I mean, I think that's good information. If you're gonna present it to the city council, at least they have a ballpark number.
I can get you a ballpark number either way. We still have to survey, but we don't have to do near the platting work and finding out what everything is. You have to do it legally, so.
There's some extra legal costs too.
We are gonna probably, if we go in, we could possibly get into some easement, you know, things, only with the trail if that happens, but it's pretty much straight road, it probably won't.
Well, and then how much would we be looking at for admin costs for doing assessments for all those roads as well? I mean, there's gonna be a lot of admin paperwork and cost that would be incurred by the city to do all that.
You're gonna have to have more meetings, because you'll have to get approved every time you go through one of those processes.
I mean, I'm not saying I'm for or against assessment. I just want to know all the numbers that would be involved.
Mr. Chair, I think that would be also something that the city administrator could help with to do some research like through the League of Minnesota Cities. That's a good, you know, body to get information from that. But I was just going to add too that cities that have been involved with, you know, ongoing road improvement projects, ongoing road, you know, bonding and and city councils that can see from year to year, this is what we spent, you know, and this is the proposed project for this upcoming year. How does that fit in with what we've done historically? And do we want to do that going forward? And then you address your engineering, you know, your 30-year plan or whatever. Take some time, I think, to get onto it, but once you do, it's, you know, just another step in the budgeting process.
Great.
So I think the admin has some, you know, some research to do to come back for this committee and for the city council to move ahead with making some decisions on this package.
Okay,
Does
so.
that make sense, Tom?
Yeah, I mean, yes. I guess when I first were planning this meeting, it seemed like we were looking at a simpler question, you know, do we want to assess or not? And what, you know, is trying to get an idea of, okay, so we knew our last bond was about 1.7 or $2 million, and now we're gonna be at 6. In that ballpark, can we say that we have to assess to do that, yes or no? And that was the hope, was to be able to make the recommendation. I can see where you want more information to do that, and I don't think that's a problem. I did put in the agenda that we'd possibly make a recommendation. I didn't say we would make a recommendation.
mhm.
So I anticipated that there might be some hiccups to this. So yes, that makes a lot of sense to me. There's other things that I can answer tonight that will help. And so there's a small cities, I forget the exact acronym, but basically the state is kicking money back to the out state to help with building roads. And I think our amount for, I can't remember, it was 23 or 24, was $86,000 for that year. And it's supposed to escalate.
Mhm.
So I don't know what it'll be by the time we do this bond. So that will help us make the bond payment then, provided that money, the state continues to.
How many miles are we trying to do?
9.
Pretty
So
small
they're gonna kick in
fraction
a
of the
third of the
total
line.
bill, probably.
Yeah, it's just what I'd
Overall.
imagine.
Yeah.
What's that?
It'd probably be a pretty small fraction of the amount though, wouldn't it?
Right.
Yeah.
I'm looking
But
at
at least
it
it's
as
something.
it
Right.
offsets
Yeah.
part of the bond payment is what I was
Right.
hoping.
No. Interesting.
Okay, well then, is there anyone else who wants to mention anything at this point? If not, I was just thinking that why don't we wait for this for the information for next meeting then? That Tom has brought up and that's been brought up here.
Are you planning on doing that for the one later this month? Or the one next month?
This is a lot of stuff to accumulate.
Right.
I will try to have something for a meeting this month, and that was why I also said at the end of this, subject to volume of agenda items, if I can get something that makes sense for us to meet about, I'll send out an agenda a week ahead of time.
Okay.
If I can't, I'll send out a notice saying we'll have our meeting in February at the last Wednesday of the month.
Now,
Mr. Chair,
it says
can
in
we-
here that, it says January 31st that we're gonna have a next meeting?
Potentially.
Potential, oh, okay. Not sure.
It's such a short turnaround time for me to get some of this stuff together, depending on
Okay.
who I have to consult with. I may not be able to get it put together. Really, that gives me about a week.
Okay. Yeah,
Can we summarize what it is we're asking Tom and the city administrator to bring back to the committee, just for the record, for the minutes?
right.
Sure.
Okay, well, I'll take a crack at it and add
Okay.
anything that you feel. But first of all, what is our history, the current, the past bonds and the current one, and what will drop off when? And the schedule of all that. How much does that affect our levy currently? What percentage of it, or how many points does it add to the levy with this last year's levy of 9.9% or something that we've had? And then the other would be, let's see, from that history, then what else were you asking then, Tom? Oh, about assessment policy, maybe how that impacts the levy, or not the levy, but how it impact how much we put into a bond. What would be recommended, or anything like that? What percentage is assessment, what percentage is bonding? And then how that would affect it, as much as possible, the best faith guess. An educated guess is what that might be at this point.
Probably what we would end up doing for that is looking at the assessment policies of the towns around us.
Right.
Mhm.
It usually floats around 25%.
It's 20 to 30%.
Okay,
Number.
20 to 30%, okay. Then in addition, the current list here, this wish list that we have, and a nice educated guess as to what the cost might be. What which ones are absolute priority versus which ones are very important to get done versus what can be slid off a couple years or whatever. So that way we can pare down if necessary, whatever we can.
So one other positive there, originally this list would have included the alleyway, for instance, near the motel behind the post office. We were able to do that one this year with leftover money from our maintenance budget.
Okay,
So it's possible other little short segments of roads could come off this list
Mhm.
prior to 25 or whenever we produce this. That won't impact it a lot because you take one road like Church Street or City Hall Street,
okay,
where there's they're expensive roads to do.
great.
But it's something.
And it's one of the benefits of having a good, list of roads and projects that if you have some extra or you don't have enough, then you can pick and choose based on what your estimates are for getting that work done from year to year.
Yeah.
Could I add on that,
Mhm.
on that, bonding history, that we could get those numbers in principal and interest paid in that debt service? Okay. And then also, Mr. Chair, could we get some information on what the initial process would be for this committee and for the city council to see if we were looking at doing an assessment policy, what that would, what is that process from beginning, going forward? How do you even start doing that?
And how does that impact the schedule?
I would have to go through the doing part first, which.
I mean, even for the city council to adopt a policy that from, this year on, we're gonna start assessing these road improvement projects. Or not, and then, but it's a yes or no then, and you have some place to start, from year to year.
Can I add
Yeah.
one thing, as I'm sitting here listening and thinking all this? I think, just listening to this, the first question that needs to be asked is, why don't we go to the council and ask them what is a dollar amount or percentage points against the levy that they feel based upon the budget information that we are currently working through in the big picture of the city, that they would be comfortable with in putting together some parameters and get back to us. Meaning, hey, we're comfortable with a levy amount of X or this many percentage points. Because then knowing that information above all this other information, it helps guide all these other questions. Are we gonna levy? Are we gonna assess? What the dollar amounts are we working with? And it kind of gives us a frame of reference to start to work in, so that going through all this work and stuff and going to the council with a number, if it's not already in line with what they might be currently thinking or have budgeting or thinking about, that then, kind of could get knocked down right away and start at ground zero. So in my mind, I would say let's ask the council for some sort of feedback or criteria for us to at least have as a reference or frame of mind. Does that make sense, what I'm saying or asking for?
I think that just muddies the water. I think you gotta go about it the other way, to give the council some figures to think about.
Yeah, I guess after going through a budget process this last year, there's a budget and so many dollars. And no matter what this wish list is there, if the money's not there, it's not going to be there, and all this work's done in vain. So I understand that point of view, but now being on the flip side of it and going through the budget, if the money, if the money's not there, it's not there, and this isn't gonna happen, we're even spinning our wheels more on this side until we get some sense of, hey, this bond is up in 2025. It was currently X amount, per year. We're comfortable spending that again, or we're currently comfortable spending 2 times that again because we understand that, the prices went up and double. And just having that general knowledge and feedback would really help drive this conversation. That way we're not thinking one thing and we get blindsided by the council. And so let's engage them to help direct us on the front end.
But if the money's not there, that would drive it towards assessment.
Right, but
So-
then that's gonna answer that question right away. Hey, the council says the money's not there, then I think the answer on our end is easier than assessments. And that's the information I think we're looking
And
for.
that analysis might even, it would be helpful to you if you did assess the project, how much more would that give the city to, to extend,
Sure.
down this list of problem roads?
Could I make
Does that make sense?
a little bit of a suggestion? So from what I can tell, if we're doing a 30-year cycle, we need to do 7.75 miles of road in each block. And that's approximately $5.5 million.
It's
We're asking
approximately
for
what?
9.
I'm sorry.
We're asking for, in this project, we're looking at 9 miles at 6.2. But I think the council's goal should be at a minimum that they're doing 5.5 and 7.5 miles. So you don't start accumulating, like Joe was saying, a bigger and bigger.
Right.
My question was gonna be, how many streets did you kick down the road last time?
But the city council's question is gonna be, how much more do we want to increase taxes? That's where the rubber hits the road.
Right.
How
Exactly.
much are you willing to spend year to
Exactly.
year? And that's gonna, that's gonna drive everything.
Right, and that's the question that needs to be asked on the front end, not the back end.
Right.
And in
I
my
agree.
mind, first of all, we can continue with, we'll ask for that information that we just brought up. It basically is 4 points. The last one that you brought up was the interest or the costs of the bond, right? And the history of it. And then those, the other 3 that I brought up. But in my mind, what I'm really curious about was whether the council will even consider assessments or not.
Right,
We
yeah,
need to bring that up at the same
Exactly.
time. While they're getting this information, we can bring that up at the council. And I have a feeling that there'll be a big resistance to it, especially with certain people.
yeah, I just think all those questions need to be asked of the council first. And then get those answers back to here, otherwise we could be spinning our wheels a lot in this room until we know those answers.
But I think asking for the information that we were just outlined while we're doing that with the council doesn't spin our wheels at all. I think it'd be good to get that for the next meeting. Meanwhile, we'll ask the council those
Right.
questions.
Well, another factor driving all this though is as the roads fall apart, the council's gonna be forced to do something.
Right.
So that's also a factor in it.
Yeah.
That's
That's
why
why-
I say we need to keep up with it. So we have
Right.
to be thinking in
Yeah.
terms of
Yeah.
7.5 miles every time this bond issue comes
Yeah.
up.
Yeah, and that information is really helpful. Like you're saying, 5.5 to 7.5 miles of road, we won't keep up if we don't have that as a minimum.
Mhm.
But right now we have 9.5 here, so. Information like that will be really important for us to bring to the council as well.
That's a council decision.
It is. Any other comments on this then?
All I would say is if any of you think of something a question you'd like to have answered in
Uh-huh.
between, don't hesitate to send me an email.
Okay,
And then if I have to employ Joe or Jenny or whoever to try to help answer that, it gives us a chance to be better prepared for what you want to see next month.
Is there anything just that you would maybe want changed to go to the We
No,
got-
I like what you brought up here. This is a great wish list. That's the way I call it right now. And
Percentages.
Fine. Oh.
Your design percentage.
What are they, like, one?
okay, Cam, do you have anything else? No. Galen, do you have anything you want to mention?
No.
Oh, sorry.
You got
Yeah, okay. And do you have anything?
I'm
else?
good. I'm good.
Go ahead.
No, I'm good. I have nothing.
Okay, thank you. Bill, anything else? Tom? Tom? Okay, well then, if it's all right, I'd like to, go to the last item on here. Any committee member concerns or questions or reports? Anyone have anything that they want to bring up? If not, then I'd like to mention that we will possibly have the meeting on January 31st. Don will let us know ahead of time. And,
Likely not, because it only gives me a week to prepare.
right. Okay, and then otherwise would be in February, the standard.
Wednesday of February.
Okay, with that, do I have anyone who'd like to recommend that we adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
I.
Opposed? It's carried. Thank you very much.